Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and I am back today with my card for the Clair Stamps August Challenge. Now there is an inspiration photo for this challenge and the theme is also layers. So that's what I'm going to be working with today. Working off that inspiration photo and working with the layers theme. So what I decided to do was actually do quite a bit of layering with not only inks, but stenciling and also some stamped images as well. So I am starting off with an A2 side folding note card that I made myself. This is just plain white cardstock, and I'm going to be using some painter's tape. I believe this is 3/4 of an inch, or maybe it's a whole inch wide, and I'm just going to put this on all four sides, and that's going to be kind of my homemade stencil to create a nice square area where I just want this stencil to go. Then I've got this large dot stencil. This is from Stampin' Up! You could easily make one of these yourselves with just a circle die. However, I have this on hand, so that's what I'm going to be using. Now I just want to go ahead and tape this down in place just so it doesn't move around on me, because I'm going to be using quite a bit of ink on this and switching up my inks a lot, so I don't want to have to take the chance of this moving and then repositioning it. If I just tape it down the first time, it'll stay in place and I save quite a bit of time. Now one thing I want to do is get the placement right. And I want all four corners of my stenciled, my square area or rectangle area here, to have some ink on them. So that's why you see me moving and twisting the stencil around until I get it exactly where I want it. Then I'll go ahead and tape that right in place. Now I have pulled some distress inks that match the color of the image, the inspiration photo that I showed you first. There are a row of colors on the right hand side, and I just pulled colors to match that. So I'm starting out with some squeezed lemonade here, and these are all distress inks. I'm going to start in the top left hand corner and work my way down to the bottom right hand corner. So again, I'm starting off with squeezed lemonade here, and I am going to speed you up a little bit because this did take some time. I wanted to start off very, very lightly and work and build up my color and really layer it up, again going with that layers theme. But I find if I layer it, especially over regular cardstock, it does move around and blend in just a little bit better. So once I had squeezed lemonade, then I mixed that with a little bit of mustard seed. Then I'm moving on to spice marmalade. That's my orange color, and I'm blending back and forth between the mustard seed and the spice marmalade. Then I'll go ahead and put my mustard seed away once I have that all blended out, and I'll move on to some vintage photo. Then I'll go ahead and go back and forth between the vintage photo and the spice marmalade until I get the blend there that I want. Then I'll go ahead and put my spice marmalade away. I'm moving on to a little bit of olive. Crushed olive, I believe is what it's called. And now I'm going to go ahead and go back and forth between the vintage photo and the crushed olive. And then for my final color in the very bottom right hand corner, I'm going to go ahead and put in just a little bit of mowed lawn and go back and forth between the olive and the mowed lawn, just to brighten that green up a little bit. Then when I take the stencil off, I've got this beautiful gradient. And the great thing about that inspiration photo is I would have never chosen these colors on my own, but looking at that inspiration photo, that's where I drew those colors, and it really is a gorgeous blend of colors that I just never would have used on my own. So once I had the stencil removed, it was time to take off that painter's tape around the rectangle area, and the best thing to do is just pull that right back on itself. I did remove a little bit of the stickiness before I put it down, but just take your time and peel it up nice and easily, and you shouldn't have any ripping. Now to go ahead and give this a defined area, I pulled out my Micron pen. This is just a black pen, but it's a very dark black, so it's one of my favorites, and it glides on nice and easily. Any black pen would do though. I'm using my T-square ruler to make sure these are nice and straight, and then I'm just going to outline that rectangle that I created and give it a nice black edge. Now I am going out just a little bit and creating kind of a little square with two lines right on the outside of each corner. Now if you didn't want to add those little squares on the outside of it, you could always just outline your little area while you still have your painter's tape on. I just thought this was a little something different. So for my stamped images, I am using this springtime flowers. In that set, there's this great daisy image, and that's what I'm going to be using today. I'm also going to be using another stamp that I'll show you in just a minute, but the first thing I did was I went ahead and stamped out that daisy 3 separate times with Memento Tuxedo black ink, and I am going to be using my alcohol markers, and I know that this ink is a dye ink and it dries very quickly, but I'm using some pretty light colors in these, especially with my yellows. So I like to go ahead and give that a nice heat set with my heat gun, just because every once in a while sometimes the ink will get a little bit thick and it just won't dry all the way, and I'll get that smearing, especially with my yellows. So I just take the extra 30 seconds and give it a little zap with my heat gun. Now on 2 of these flowers, I'm going to be pulling from the brown area of that inspiration photo, and I am just coloring these in very quickly with some browns and creams. I wanted that yellow one to really pop, so I wanted to go ahead and make these 2 that are going to be underneath just a little bit darker. Now on the inside of the flower, the little center of the flower, I used some browns and just did some dots until it was completely covered with color, and that gives it a nice texture. Now for the yellows, I started off with a little bit of orange and caramel color, just to kind of pull from those browns, and then I'm moving on to my yellows, starting off with the darkest and moving towards my lightest. And some of those leaves with shading on the very outside edge, I did put a little bit of dark and then worked the lightest towards the center for something different. I did the same thing with the dots and browns on the center of that flower as well. Now I wanted to add some leaves behind these flowers, but there are no leaves in this stamp set. But there is this great image of these little flowers that kind of create almost a quarter circle here. So I went ahead and inked those up with some Memento. I'm only going to be using that largest flower right there in the center. So I only concentrated on inking that one up, and I'll be fussy cutting these. So I'm just going to scribble down some color pretty quickly here. I'm using some dark greens and light greens, and just working my way out from the center towards the very edge. I'm not worried about any bleeding or anything here, so I'm really laying down this color pretty thickly. And then once I have those all done, then I'll go ahead and start fussy cutting those out. I kept 3 of the leaves together and then the other 2 together as well. These are going to be my leaves for my little flowers over there. Now after I fussy cut, I do go around all the edges. This time I'm using my alcohol marker. I don't mind a little bleeding on these, but if you don't want any bleeding, don't use an alcohol marker. Go ahead and use like your distress marker or something with a felt tip. And I did that not only on the flowers, but the leaves as well. Now once I had those all done, it was time to start assembling these in a little cluster. So I wanted to focus on the bottom left-hand corner. So what I decided to do was actually layer these up. That is the theme of the challenge, so that's what I wanted to do. Now I am using some fun foam and double-sided adhesive. You could also use foam tape. I just happen to prefer putting my own together so I can get it the right size and I don't have to end up cutting anything sticky up. It sticks to my scissors, I get frustrated, so I just find I use it more if I use fun foam and add my own adhesive to it. Now, once I had those 2 brown flowers down, I went ahead and put the yellow one down with 1 piece of fun foam on the left-hand side, and then where it overlaps the brown flowers, I stuck another piece of fun foam right under that. So that's going to give it kind of like a 2-dimensional effect. So it just sticks up a little bit further than those brown flowers underneath. Now for the leaves, like I said before, I just had them in groups of 3 and groups of 2, and they just kind of fell apart that way. And now I'm just going to again put some fun foam on the back of them and tuck them right behind those flowers wherever I think they need a little something green or extra. Now you can see some of these do hang over just a little bit further. You could cut this flush so it's completely flush with the card, then you won't have to make your own envelope. But I have one of the We Are Memory Keepers envelope makers, so it really doesn't bother me to make my own envelopes that will fit this card. Now I also went ahead and stuck a few leaves right under the front of that yellow flower too, and those are going to be up just a little bit higher than the other ones as well. Then once I had that done, the last thing to do was add my sentiment to this card. So I'm going to be using one of my absolute favorite sentiment sets, not just from Clair, but just ever. I love this sentiment set and I use it all the time, especially when I'm mixing companies up. I love this one. So this is a sentiment builder set. So I went ahead and pulled off the scripty sending, and I'm going to stamp this straight on to the card base itself. I'll be using some black ink so it really stands out, and I'm using my Misty because I'm going to stamp this a few times and get it nice and bold and rich, just because it is up against all that texture from the stencils and the ink blending. I really want this to stand out from that background, so I'll give it a few stamps just to make sure it is nice and bold and black. I went ahead and inked that up, then I can flip the lid over and it stamps exactly where the first one stamped. Now right underneath that sending, I went ahead and pulled off the word gratitude, and I'm going to stamp that right underneath. Of course, you could use this card for any occasion, not just a thank you card. But once I had that done, that completely finished off this card. I hope you guys enjoyed this video tutorial today. I'm going to leave you with a few pictures of the finished card. On the left side of your screen, you're going to see a few different links you can click on. The top will take you to a video you might enjoy watching next. The bottom left will take you to the supply list for this card and more information about the challenge. And the bottom right hand corner will subscribe you to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!